Cavalry's back.
We are no one. We are everyone. We are invisible.
I'm just going to ask you a series of questions. Answer them honestly.
You believe your life is under direct and immediate threat?
I wear the mask to protect myself.
3 years of peace. And we convinced ourselves that they were gone. But they were just hibernating.
And that time is near.
Just the end of the world.
It's only just begun.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Who Watches, a podcast covering the HBO series Watchmen. This week we're covering episode 3, She Was Killed by Space Junk. I'm Travis Fishburne.
I'm Ryan DeVere.
And I'm Dustin Meadows.
And this show, every week, I keep thinking it's not going to get any better. It's just plateaued and it can't top itself. But every week, I think it just keeps proving me wrong. It is so dense. It is so filled with all of these things to unpack. I feel like I need to stop myself because it's going on too quickly. I feel like even for a weekly show. So yeah, what do you guys think about this week's episode?
It was good. It confirmed some of my, and I'm sure probably several other people's theories about the identities of some characters, among other things. Also, in keeping consistent, also raised a whole lot of new questions.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, like you said, it continues kind of getting denser, and like every week, like it's like Lost was at its peak. It's like, hey, here's an answer, and here's 5 more mysteries.
Yeah.
Which the show has been really good about doing. Which again, I think is going to be to the benefit if this is just kind of a one-off series. They'll be able. I think they can sustain that momentum for an entire season.
Mm-hmm. And an entire season is all I really care about them doing. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to listen to the official HBO podcast with Damon Lindelof.
I have not. And I'm going to tell you right now, we did it first.
Yeah.
So HBO can bite me.
Yeah, when
I saw the commercial for it at the end of the episode today, I was like, look, I'm sure this was probably well in the works, like when you pitched the show, but like, get out of here.
Yeah.
Was it though? Does it seem like? So I didn't get to listen to it either. Did you?
Yes, I've listened to it twice so far already.
Oh, wow.
Because I wanted to make sure I was listening to everything correctly. And Damon Lindelof, they had a list of things that they wanted to cover or to check off when they were making the show to make sure that it was worth making. And one of the terms that they had that they wanted to, that they referred to the original as, that they wanted to be as well, was self-contained, which he stated in the podcast that everything that we're seeing, all the questions we have, are all going to be definitively answered in this season.
Perfect.
But yeah, in terms of the podcast artwork, nobody else had it at the time. So
Yeah. So HBO, you'll be hearing from our lawyers.
Well, I mean, I'm glad that they're adding some context to it. It sounds like this was kind of deliberate. They're not just throwing a podcast out there. I think there's room for 2 podcasts, don't you?
I mean, we're talking about pop culture on a podcast, so obviously I have to be okay with the idea of multiple podcasts existing to some extent. I kind of hate this practice, and Nerdist and Chris Hardwick are largely to blame for it, of this like show-sponsored version of the deconstruction of the show. Like you had that with Talking Dead, and then with Talking Bad. They did that with Breaking Bad.
Talking AMC show title afterwards.
Yeah, like I mean, it doesn't help that I hate Chris Hardwick, and also that he it's probably been 2 or 3 years now, has proven himself to be a gigantic scumbag on top of everything else. But like, he's so smug, and I just hate him. And he takes like I hate that he's built an empire around pop culture. This thing that I like. Obviously, we're doing a podcast where we deconstruct a show, so obviously we're all pop culture junkies here to some extent. I just hate that he took this kind of big abstract thing that I loved and like just made it so sterile and boring and lame, and like I'm sure the Lindelof, the podcast, the HBO one is actually probably very good.
It is,
especially since they've got Lindelof. It's just like I don't know. Like it seems weird when it's coming from the source material. Like I mean, sure, there's a lot of podcasts that like deconstruct like horror movies or whatever else, and there's a lot of garbage you got to wade through. But it's like I wasn't even aware of like that podcast was going to happen. Then as soon as I saw, I was like, all right, well, what are we doing?
But I think we get to experience. So, like, there's the concept of like, once an author writes a book and releases it to the public, it's not the author's story anymore. It's the audience's, and so that's who we are. We get to be the voice of that.
Absolutely.
And so he gets to speak to what he intended it to be. We get to speak to what it is and how it was received.
That's a fair point. That's and that's in keeping with. There's a term for that within popular culture, which I have a degree in. So
I'm trying to think of what that word is.
So
as well.
so what Lindelof essentially is doing with his dissection, since he's your creator, is the intended reading. What we're doing is a negotiated reading, which might not necessarily conflict with his ideas, but this is how we're perceiving it as someone who didn't create it.
Yeah.
So,
which, regarding this source material, you could make similar arguments with Alan Moore's feeling on his own work. And
sure.
the
Absolutely.
audience's
Absolutely. Because, I mean,
reception of it.
like, essentially, if you boil it down, I can't remember if I've said this or not before on this podcast before, but this show is essentially fan fiction.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I mean...
Through and through.
And I mean, at this point, realistically, like, the MCU is fan fiction, for God's sakes. Like, anything based on an existing property at this point, like especially now that Stan Lee has unfortunately passed away, now it's like, how many Marvel people from, like, the inception are involved in any of that stuff?
Yeah.
So...
Yeah.
We're staying here, HBO. You can't get rid of us.
All
That's
to
the
say.
takeaway.
Well, they're only doing episodes every 3 episodes of this series is when they're going to be releasing one of these interview episodes with Damon Lindelof. But he dropped quite a few interesting nuggets in there. So one of those being that this is a self-contained story, which I was happy to hear.
Great.
Yeah, I'm very pro that. Yeah, God, more shows should do that or have an end in sight. Like, I think that's why Breaking Bad was so good, was because there's like, oh, we could keep going for 5 more seasons. Like, yeah, but what if we didn't and we ended on our own terms?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, and with a show like this, I would be so much more happy to have, like, the book itself. It's so dense and so rich and rewards rewatches and deep dives and exploring all these different avenues. I would prefer to have something like that be self-contained in 9 episodes that are just kind of like perfectly told as much as you can, rather than let's stretch this into season 2, 3, 4. It gets watered down, we get tired of it, and it loses it.
Cast members get DUIs and you got to shoot around them.
Yeah.
Who knows what else?
Speaking of the source material, the last time we talked, Dustin, Ryan had not read any of Watchmen.
Did you read Watchmen?
And after last week's recording and after last week's episode, Ryan was very interested and borrowed my copy. So how far have you made it into the...
I haven't actually even cracked it yet.
Oh, okay.
I know. But it, man, like...
All that fanfare.
Right. But, like, after watching through these... even just 3 episodes, I can't imagine not going through it at this point. Like, I can't believe I haven't, just based on kind of a background in comics and stuff.
Yeah,
anyway.
it is not because... One of the reasons I wanted you to do this is because you're very well informed in comics, especially Marvel in particular, like the Marvel Comics world.
Yeah.
We see all the MCU movies together, and you're usually the one telling me about certain characters that I'm not as familiar with. So, the fact that, I think
this is a huge hole in my experience. And it's because largely DC does, like, it kind of was this standalone thing that they've more or less left alone. You don't have to experience the Watchmen in order to get the extent of the DC universe, but it's still hailed as just basically a perfection of form.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm super excited to get into it. I have to find the time to actually get into it deep, because it's going to be deep.
Yeah, it's good, and I mean, especially this episode, there's a lot of stuff that throws back to
Yeah.
the comic.
Yeah, this is the first episode where I really had like a Watchmen feel to it, where
Yeah.
I really felt deeply connected to the history of the world and the characters and it all tying together.
Oh yeah, and a lot of the visuals too. Like you even called it last week when we were talking about it, the funeral scene and sharing some of that same imagery from the comedian's funeral in the comics.
Yeah.
Like there's that overhead shot
Of the angel.
and everything, same as in the comics. So it's really cool seeing where they're kind of like picking and placing those visuals, and then the new ones we're getting, and then there's a lot going on in this episode. So I guess we should just start and dive into it.
So, okay, we'll go ahead and start with the opening. We open on a dial tone that reveals the show title. I love how they've been revealing the show titles, by the way, different every episode. We see Laurie. We don't know who it is, but we see Laurie in a booth that connects to a Mars antenna, and she gets on the line to leave a message.
Well, do we see the Mars antenna in that first shot, or do we not see that until the end?
No, I think it's
Yeah, they establish it at the beginning.
Okay, I must have missed it, because right up until the end, I thought she was in like a prisoner visitation thing.
Oh.
I thought she was like talking.
Oh,
so like
to-
my mind was racing.
Okay, you were
the whole
thinking-
time. I was thinking, I was like, who is she talking to? Because I didn't realize she was in a phone booth.
Yeah.
So because I kept thinking, I was like, is Dan Dryberg in jail? Is she talking to the old night owl? Like,
Well, I think that might be true, but not.
yeah.
But yeah, so she gets on the line to leave a message for Dr. Manhattan, and as Laurie begins to tell a joke, we see her enter a bank and thwart a vigilante with a stinged bank robbery set up by the FBI.
Yeah. Which is really interesting, because we saw from like the preview from last week's episode, like we knew who she was. So as soon as she started went to rob the bank, I was like, I'm very confused what's happening here. Maybe it's a training exercise. And then like we see that very night owl-esque looking vigilante jump in to intercept it, and then the reveal that it's a sting. And she clearly, since the end of the comic and now, has developed a very deep dislike for costumed heroes.
Yeah.
Which is really, I'm very curious what happened with her and Dan, why she went into government work and assumed her father's last name, and dropped the Juspesic. And then, of course, like there's that really great exchange between her and one of the cops, like as they're leaving the bank, because she shoots the costume heroes he's trying to escape. It's like, how'd you know that the body armor was going to stop the bullets? And she just doesn't answer, which to me just says she didn't know that it would.
No,
like
obviously, yeah.
she would have been fine if that person had been killed by her.
Yeah.
So she's ruthless in her apprehension of masked heroes.
I don't even think it's apprehension. I think it's like she's just going to try and kill him, and if it just ends up with them getting arrested instead, fine.
Yeah. So I get there's another great thing where like it sets up questions, like, because now I want to know what's happened to her over the last 34 years that this is where she's landed. Because we already saw we've got the theory that potentially Dan may have been working for the police force, since they have their own Archimedes as a transport vehicle, and similar night owl goggles as well.
Yeah, I think at this point, I don't know if that's true, because in the next scene we see that there's reference to an owl being in a cage, which we assume is Dan. Which I think. So I think probably all of his gadgets got confiscated.
Oh, that
and
makes
then
sense.
Repurposed.
They just reverse engineer.
Yeah.
And
So I got a question then. Sorry, just lore wise about in Watchmen, you have all these vigilantes, and they're somewhat sponsored by the state.
Well, only two
Only
of them.
comedian. That's right. We
Yeah,
talked about
comedian
that.
and Dr. Manhattan.
Because he's Dr. Manhattan. How do you
Yeah.
arrest him? But like, they're not pursued in the same way that we're seeing in this, right?
No, there's the Keene Act that was passed in 77, which technically outlawed vigilantism,
Yeah.
but most of them retired on their own, except for Rorschach.
Yeah, he was pretty much the only one illegally operating still at the time that the comic starts.
Which
Gotcha.
it's an interesting thing in this world and in this present day, 35 years after that, there's this, I think his name was Mr. Shadow, she confirmed. There, and she's hunting down these guys all the time. There are new ones popping up here and there, which is an interesting aspect of people knowing this is illegal and doing it anyway.
Yeah.
They weren't even around back when it was legal.
Yeah, so it's really curious what their impetus is for it. Because, like, we see obviously that the 7th Cavalry read Rorschach's journal and went the worst possible direction with it. So could this possibly be the axe swinging the other way on that, where people read that and were like, hey, this guy was kind of a sociopath, but, you know, fighting crime is not a bad idea on paper.
No.
And maybe that's kind of what pushed them, that idea of not compromising, that idea of, like, doing something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's very true.
Interesting.
Yeah. One thing I really loved about this scene, or like from the get-go, and it's revealed when we see this vigilante, this Mr. Shadow character, is I thought this looks just like the beginning of The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Is what I thought.
Yeah, like even down to the hues and the colors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, which, yeah, it looked very bleak, very, very good. I
Yeah.
mean, which in turn also was just borrowing from Heat, but that's besides the point. Coming for you next, Christopher Nolan.
Oh my. Moving on from that scene, Laurie arrives back at her apartment, plays some Devo.
Yes, nice little reference to her remark about him in the comics.
Yeah. Feeds her owl and gets a visit from Joe Keene Jr.
Yeah, I like that she answers the door literally before the lyrics come in on that song.
Yeah.
Because the song by Devo is called Mongoloid. And the first line of the song is Mongoloid, he was a Mongoloid.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Cause they used the extended intro, because if they had gone with the radio version, we would have been hearing lyrics before the door ever rang, and they're probably like, maybe we shouldn't have them saying a frowned upon, outdated, un-PC term for someone with a mental disability.
Yeah, but do you think that's a setup for Senator Keene? I mean, do you think nothing else seems to be incidental in this show?
Oh no, I think it was entirely just a reference. So in the comics, Laurie makes a comment to Dan about his goggles. She says they're very Devo. And he's like, "What's that?" It's like, "Oh, they're this like punk band from Akron, Ohio." Like, everything. So like she displays like a clear like and knowledge of Devo. So I think it's entirely just a throwback to that, just
Gotcha.
to kind of further establish details of Laurie's character.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So then Mr. Keene informs her that the deputy director is going to send her to Tulsa to take the lead on Judd Crawford's murder investigation. He thinks it may be a vigilante. She thinks that he's only concerned about it because it will affect his run for president. And he tells her that the president can pardon anybody he wants. He could even get her owl out of that cage. Which they're talking about both a literal owl and potentially Dan Drybird.
Yeah.
Potentially, like I feel like that was pretty clearly spelled out.
Yeah, I mean more or less. We just haven't seen him yet. So it's all conjecture at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, her owl named Who. So yeah, I think I started thinking about that and what that could mean and the trajectory of her character and him. they kind of like found each other and they were somewhat kindred spirits, but I think it's kind of clear that she thinks that Dan is too soft.
Yes.
And I think there is probably some kind of a point where the government came after both of them, and Dan refused to kind of compromise any of his morals, not a Rorschach kind of a way, but he just kind of surrendered and turned himself in.
Yeah.
Whereas she was, I think, took some kind of a plea deal to
Yeah, she
help them
parlayed
hunt
that into a
vigilantes.
career, essentially. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, there's something else that HBO had.
Oh no! It's a long way around the barn for a dick joke. Because she refers to him as too soft, and there's literally an instance in the comic where they try to have sex and he can't get it up.
Yeah.
Oh, poor Dan getting dunked on when he's not even there to defend himself. Oh, Patrick Wilson's weeping.
What did you start to say, Travis?
I can't even remember now.
It derailed the whole thing.
HBO has been releasing these things called the Peteypedia. I don't know if you've seen any of this, but after every episode, they've been releasing these files called Peteypedia, which they are very similar to the end of every chapter in the comic.
Okay.
Where we're getting articles, police reports, things from within the world that are informing us of what this world is and a little bit of the history.
Interesting.
I'll just send you
That's a
some
really
links.
cool touch.
Yeah.
Is that all like on the show's website? I'm assuming. Okay.
Yeah. So
that's kind of a really cool way to address that, to kind of still have that epistolary component, since it's not in print format now.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
yeah. And
So how deep does that go?
oh, it goes pretty deep. I've only read the first 4 articles so far, but one of them addresses that Laurie Blake was, for a number of years, was known as the comedian.
Yeah, I caught that much when I was looking at the wiki for the character.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, before she, I think, officially like took on this role in the FBI.
It's the anti-vigilante task force head.
Yeah. And another interesting thing that I found out reading some of that, which is a question I had in this scene and some other things that we've seen in this world, is she does a voice command to play Devo.
Yeah.
However, it's played from a CD. It's played from a disc, which is like, the technology is a little bit different than our world right now. They have pagers, and yet they're still using landlines. We see in the FBI briefing, they're using a slide projector.
Yeah.
So according to some of the articles from Peteypedia, there was an instance of extreme technophobia in the late 80s and 90s following what happened in New York.
Interesting.
Because they believe that was tied to the rapid growth of computers and technology, as well as the cancer scare from Dr. Manhattan technology.
Yeah.
People were afraid of getting cancer from Dr. Manhattan and any technology that came from him. So it set everybody back by quite a bit.
Yeah, like
Interesting.
2 decades.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool, because we don't see, like, there's hardly even anything in keeping up with our current technology on the show, which is really interesting.
Except for the hologram.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's
the
some
holograms.
stuff they have that is, beyond what we have. And then there's some stuff they have that is like, why are you still using that? So
Yeah.
it's an interesting way
Well, like,
to
I mean,
address that.
we've seen flip phones
Yeah.
still, like, which is insane. I'm gonna have to check that out. That's really cool. That's
Yeah.
That's a really awesome way to approach that too, and to have just kind of all those. God, this is like, I'm fascinated by how I went from feeling like I was gonna be indifferent to this show to just like how blown away I am by the attention and the detail that they're putting into even stuff like outside of the show itself. That is an insane level of attention to detail, and that's really cool.
Yeah. I feel like any other show, I would see stuff like this and I would read it and I'd be like, they got some intern to like write some things in to fill in the details. But this, I'm like, this seems like this is all came from Lindelof and his team of writers when they were breaking everything and they were trying to create the history of this world and where it came from, how it led to this and where it's going. It just really feels so meticulous and intentional. And, you know, if you listen to the podcast as well, you hear him explain so many things that you're like, yeah, that makes sense. I get it. Like, and he's just such a fan of this that, you know, he wanted to make sure that he was as, you know, intentional about all of these details as he could be.
Man, and that's how it should be.
Yeah.
Like every time we talk about this, like I'm just gonna keep going back and weeping over the blown potential of Game of Thrones.
Oh my, yeah.
Like, well, especially now that like they had that panel at I think it was like the Austin Film Conference or something, where they more or less just kept coming out. So I was like, yeah, we had no clue what we were doing. Pretty much the whole series. Like, why would you say that?
Why do you say it now? About the first season that everybody loved.
Yeah, like, oh my god! Like I read that entire like the Twitter feed of just like all of their responses and everything. I was just like, oh my god! Like, why did HBO think it was a good idea to like just let these guys keep doing this? Like, you could have brought somebody in who cared and probably made even more money. Like,
yeah.
Oh.
And so then what happened in our third scene?
So yeah, then
Yeah, let's
Watchmen.
keep going. I'm gonna be salty for a minute.
God. We cut back to Laurie in the booth, and she starts telling a joke about 3 heroes who die and meet God. The first hero is dressed as a big owl, and as we hear her tell the joke of this man who refused to take lives and was condemned to hell for it, we see her arrive at the FBI headquarters to get briefed by the deputy director of the situation in Tulsa. Laurie says she's going by herself so that the Tulsa Police Department will be more cooperative, and she picks out Petey to go with her. And Petey is this character in this episode is. These are all coming from his files on this
Petey. Yeah, that makes sense.
I wondered when you said that. Okay.
There you go. Oh, really quick before we move forward, it's worth noting she started at the beginning of the episode to tell a different joke.
Oh yes.
Which comes into play later about a bricklayer and then a brick being cast up into the air.
So this is. Do you guys watch BoJack Horseman at all?
I've watched the first 2 seasons.
So this joke was almost directly lifted from, and I'm sure it existed prior to that even. But like Lisa Kudrow from Friends plays a character in BoJack Horseman, and she does a similar joke. I mean, it's very, very similar to the point where when she opened up talking about this bricklayer who's very meticulous, I went, wait a second, I know this.
Oh, interesting.
So I kind of read it from the beginning. I was like, oh, okay, this is what they're leading towards, and we'll get there. But I just for a joke that I've never heard before to be used very blatantly in the same way in 2 shows that are, I don't know. It caught me a little bit off guard. I don't think it's lazy. I think it's a really clever. Joke,
absolutely. No, it's a good setup, but it's weird because I mean these are 2 very different shows.
Yeah, very much so. And actually used the joke plays a point in both of these episodes to very different effect too.
Yeah. Well, it's way different. 'Cause, like, I mean, even like Breaking Bad, which we mentioned before briefly, obviously has brief mentions of Ozymandias. Even though I mean Watchmen existed well before Breaking Bad, but like it's very much kind of in that same context and everything that they use the poem in that show. So it's really interesting seeing like dramatic works used in different contexts in different shows, like especially different types of shows. Like I'm trying to think of other examples right now. My brain is coming up short.
Yeah, I know I've seen this kind of thing happen before as well.
Yeah. I mean, when you're pulling from just really good sources, then you get good stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought that was interesting. Immediately, I went, "Oh, I know what this is doing."
That talking horse show spoiled it for me.
Yeah. I keep thinking of the Tale of Romulus and Remus. I know I've seen that pop up in a couple of different things, but the only thing that I can remember it from is the live-action adaptation of the Double Dragon video game.
Oh,
Because it is used in a monologue by a bleached blonde Robert Patrick who plays the villain.
oh.
But I will say this much: Double Dragon introduced me to Romulus and Remus and their tale. So,
awesome.
I guess it's not all bad; it's just mostly bad.
So then we get in this scene, we get a ton of exposition regarding Tulsa and the situation there. A lot of which we already know about. Some of which is new and is kind of revealed to us. About African Americans arriving in Tulsa so that they could claim benefits, buy land, and start businesses, and how white people tend to respond to that kind of a thing.
Yep.
Senator Joe Keene was the one who was in charge of he was the one with the idea to put the cops in masks.
So we finally got some answers
Yeah. So
on
you-
that front. That
and
this
that
is
it
an
is-
isolated thing.
Yes, exactly.
That there's kind of this test region for it
Mhm.
that apparently the rest of the world is watching and really curious about it.
Yeah.
Now, Atlanta wants on board potentially.
As does Denver. And
Yeah.
there's a call out to Laurie when he says, "Who doesn't want a secret identity?" Right, Blake?
Yeah. That's very
Which, did she have a secret identity? Because she never wore a mask. And I feel like her and her mother, they were always marketed with their names.
true. Yeah.
You know? So,
I mean, I guess for her it'd be more of an alter ego.
mm-hmm.
I think maybe as the comedian she wore a mask or
Maybe.
something. So that could potentially be because Petey even makes a crack to her later. He's like, "Hey, can I get an autograph or something?"
she jokes with him or is a little condescending to him and
Yeah.
asks if he wants an autograph
Oh,
Yes.
that's what it was. Yes.
Oh, man.
because he's so well informed about the past and history.
Yeah, that exchange was my favorite thing out of this whole episode.
Yeah.
Like, there were so many good things about the episode, but like that stood out to me. Of like,
But yeah, which we can go ahead and move ahead.
Yeah,
into that
really
scene.
really quick, jumping back to just his attention to detail. Something we glossed over. The guy giving the briefing. There's that excerpt from Rorschach's journal that
Yeah.
Petey throws in.
Which he
And he even says like, "What's this?" Like, "Oh, I thought like for context and blah blah blah, like all this stuff." And there's like, "No, get it out of here."
who
Like,
cares?
Yeah, it was him like trying to potentially add another dimension and just some context to the investigation and everything that was surrounding it. Which, like, I mean, if you're looking into a terrorist organization who are citing this guy as
their
an influence,
manifesto.
probably not a bad idea to have a little background on the actual Rorschach.
Yeah, that's a pretty insane take to have.
Yeah, it was
When-
like, oh, who cares?
Yeah, I mean, but it sounded like this guy was he was ready to get a solution out there. He felt pretty confident he knew what was happening, so why bother?
Oh yeah, for
I don't
sure.
know. I agree though. Like, you have this organization that clearly has taken on the face of
Yeah.
this guy. Maybe you should read, his
Yeah,
his
and if you
stuff.
task somebody who is supposed to be kind of an expert or at least an authority in the area, maybe listen to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it is the next scene that
Yeah.
is taking place in the plane. They're flying to Oklahoma. The pilot says something about, if you look outside, you'll see the Millennium
Millennium
Clock.
Clock, yeah.
Is this something that I should know about? This is
No,
new.
This is all new.
Okay. To which we then would also get a little bit of context to what's happening with Veidt and like that he's pronounced dead, that this other person has taken over his company.
Lady True.
True.
Which I think, yeah, they're starting to lay some groundwork for her.
Yeah.
I think she is the main connection that we are going to have between what's happening with Veidt, wherever he is, and with these events in Tulsa.
Yeah.
I think we'll start to see that kind of come together.
Yeah. According to the preview, she's popping up in the next episode
Yeah.
finally. So, oh man, what happens to a plane if the squid rain starts?
Oh, I don't know.
I wonder if that's something we're going to see later on.
That'd be fun.
But-
I'm wondering if the this Millennium Clock has something to do with the squid rain. If it has some kind of a part in creating it. I think that, Lady True is, as far as the public goes, is, carrying on the Veidt legacy.
Yeah.
And probably in private, he's communicating with her about whatever his plan as of right now is.
Yeah.
But anyway, just that whole the whole scene on the plane, you start to get the connections, the little developments of the world, the questions that we've had, like all this little stuff, really started to get answers. But Petey, Agent Petey, has clearly shown multiple times now that he's proficient and he knows the background of it. And Laurie calls him out on it. She's like, "What do you want, an autograph?" And he's like, I mean, the only time in the whole episode we see her get put in her place is by this guy who was just a slide projector operator. Like,
Yeah.
And he does such a great, like, he says, I have my PhD in this. I've done this, that, and the other. Please don't treat me like I'm just a fan.
Yeah, that's exactly what he says.
Oh, he delivered it so well. For somebody, the whole episode, Laurie is calm and cool and collected. She's on top of everything. She's calling people out. She knows, and for this guy to just be able to speak to her, and he doesn't even disrespect her. He says something to the effect of like, "Oh, I'm sorry, just because famous people aren't supposed to be interrupted." Or I forget how he says it now.
I forget what he said too.
Yeah.
But it was just this great. He stated it very well. I don't know. It was just.
She's a part of that history, and it's important.
Yeah, and he's totally right to say, we can't just ignore it. And it can't act like I don't know who you are, but we can
And that
still
you have a connection with Adrian Veidt and this situation to a degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just sets a cool tone for that relationship moving forward.
And she said, "Yeah, I knew Adrian Veidt. I too am not a fan."
Yep.
And we cut to another vignette of Laurie in the booth. She talks about the second hero figure who meets God, who was the smartest man in the world and claims to have saved humanity by dropping a giant alien squid on New York in order to induce fear and keep everyone from being afraid of each other. God calls the man a monster and sends him to hell. All the while, we see Laurie investigating the crime scene, visiting Judd's wife, and ultimately arriving at a secret warehouse in which the police department is wrangling up 7th Cavalry suspects. She meets Pirate Jenny, Red Scare, and finds Looking Glass in the pod interrogating the suspects, and she gets him to admit that Angela is Sister Knight, and that she is the one who is responsible for beating the information out of their original suspect.
That was, he says, that information was obtained in a secondary interrogation.
Yeah.
Phrases it very nicely, though, which is just like, oh, and I was like, I was not present for said interrogation. So, like, he's got deniability on the whole thing. I also like this scene because it just confirms what I said from the beginning, that this big pod is a Voight-Kampff machine for racism.
Yeah. It's a
And it
racist
is.
detector.
Yeah, it's like, it was his response. That's an oversimplification.
Yeah.
But I was like, no, that's exactly what it is. This is a Voight-Kampff for racism.
But good Lord. I mean, so these characters that we've been interacting with the last 2 episodes who have been established to be just they're detectives. The rules don't quite apply to them. They've got all these skills and things, and she just tears right through all of them.
Oh, yeah.
When she runs into Pirate Jenny and Red Scare, she asks the suspect if his civil rights are being violated.
Yeah.
And he starts going, she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't care. I was joking."
But yeah, this scene with Looking Glass, I really loved.
Oh yeah, it's so good.
In the way that she just literally peels the mask off of him.
Yeah.
And he's this character that we've seen so far. He's very much about looking into other people's souls and exposing them and reflect, he is this mask that when you look at him, you just see yourself.
Yeah.
So she gets him to take off the mask and she confronts him with some truth, and he has to turn away from her in order to answer.
Yeah. But it's really good, too, because, like, it happens over a couple of things. Because initially she starts doing the same thing that Judd did in the first episode, where she's, like, picking at her teeth and, like, kind of, like, it's almost like she's trying to make him uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And, like, hyper-aware. And she even literally says, like, if, you know, you got a mirror on your face, how do you expect people not to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And then gets him to peel it off.
She walks in and starts playing with his remote.
Yeah, oh, that was my favorite part in that scene. Because, like, literally before he starts talking, he asks for the remote back.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's afraid that she might try and use the pod on him somehow.
Oh, interesting.
Which, like, I don't necessarily know if that is anything beyond that. Like, if that would reveal anything terrible. But it seems like he is afraid of that possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, she straight up, like, yanks it away from him after he asks her not to. And starts playing with it, and then like before he even starts talking, he's like, "Can I have my control back, please?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he definitely likes to be the one in control in those situations.
So, like, she's kind of put him on the offensive, or the defensive rather.
Yeah, and so then he crumbles pretty quickly, but like it seemed like she already pretty much knew everything she needed to know to begin with. I don't know that anything he told her was stuff that she probably didn't know to begin with. She's just completely
just confirming
taking
everything.
all the control. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing too, is like, because she'd already gone to the Crawford's house at that point.
Yeah.
And we later find out that she found the closet, and that her wife said, like, you know, that Angela had been the last person to be there. So, I mean, it makes sense that she could potentially have just put two and two together. You know, like, Angela and Judd were shot on the same night. Like, she supposedly retired, but then, like, adopted her partner's kids. Like, a lot of things is, like, especially, like, being a former vigilante, like, she probably knows what kind of things to look out for. Like, if somebody is essentially continuing to operate in that way.
Yeah. So, like, what was a little weird to me is, Tulsa apparently has this act where the police wear masks. They've got this whole thing. Their identities are hidden. But this is just Tulsa. How does that work in terms of, like, traveling anywhere?
Yeah.
How does it, like, how do you have
When they're
any
working
sort
with
of
other districts
police departments? Exactly that.
I don't know.
Maybe they won't get to it. Maybe that's just a kind of a suspension of disbelief.
Like they're kind of isolated.
Yeah.
You would have
like,
to be, right? Like,
yeah. Like, I mean,
They work probably through their higher ups, which was the chief. He didn't wear a mask.
yeah.
yeah.
So probably anytime they're working with any other departments or any other districts, that would.
Like, he's literally the face of the department.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seemed a little worth exploring to me that she's like a federal agent that has to guess or do some legwork just to figure out who the detectives are.
Yeah.
and like what their names are and stuff. Interesting. It makes you kind of question how does that legislation get passed? What is Senator Keene going for with this stuff if it rolls out worldwide? How does that?
Yeah.
What kind of side effects are there? But it apparently doesn't matter if you're as clever as she is and could just figure stuff out.
Or when you have these files, because on Angela's file it does say like known aliases, Sister Knight. So at a certain point, if you're high up enough, you get to know who these people are.
Yeah.
So,
and that's probably something that they, like, because even with the mask, they probably have to disclose that to certain levels of government.
You'd have to.
Like, beyond just, like, the local carry-on.
but then we cut to another voiceover of Laurie telling the joke of hero number 3, who is pretty much a god himself.
Yep.
Blue, God does not care about humanity. When asked about the number of people he's killed, he says a live body and a dead body have the same number of particles, so it doesn't matter. Yep. Blue God then states that he knows he's going to hell and that he's already there. We see her checking into a hotel and arriving at the funeral of Chief Crawford. She introduces herself to Angela, and then during the funeral, a 7th Cavalry member shows up with a bomb attached to him. Laurie shoots him, and Angela shoves his body into the grave.
And then drops the coffin on
Yeah.
top
Crawford
of
on
it
top
to
of it.
absorb the blast.
Oof.
She says like, Crawford's the one that jumped on the grenade.
I gave him a little push.
Yep. Yeah, which is again just testament to how cold and calculating Laurie is at this point. Because like, the guy's like literally in the middle of his spiel, and then just bam, headshots.
Yeah.
him.
Which you snuck that gun in because they're supposed to give up their
Yep.
firearms.
Yep.
Yeah, so much going on in that scene. That,
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, Angela just diving in. She knows how to deal with tough situations.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing too. Is like I think even if Laurie didn't know by that point, like just Angela's reaction and her instincts like kicking in would have been enough to tip her off at that point.
yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering, if that scene potentially gives her away on a larger scale.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because like Angela does not act like a retired cop. She
No.
acts like someone whose instincts have not dulled a day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like,
Especially-
like the shots fired, and then as soon as the vest starts beeping, like she's moving like to get the body out of the way, and then like knows to like shield the blast, and that'll absorb a majority of it and keep it from spreading upward and outward once it goes off. And yeah, it's very telling. Like,
At a funeral full of cops,
yeah.
being the only one to take action, your excuse of "I used to be a cop" starts to look a little flimsy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Cool, because it's been, well, what did we establish? 3 years since the
3
White
years.
Knight. So like, yeah, 3 years of not being a cop. That's not going to be your instincts. That's not going to be your reaction. That is the training of someone who is very much actively still doing that.
Yeah. And Cal was there again,
Yeah.
Yeah.
not doing a whole lot, but he was there.
Yeah. Looking hot, apparently.
Old hot cow.
But yeah, we also see I recognize Tim Blake Nelson's eyes as one of the regular cops with the yellow masks. And
Interesting.
it looks like to his left and right is Red Scare and probably Pirate Jenny as well.
Okay.
And they're all in another form
Plain
of disguise.
clothing, yeah.
Yes. So I thought that was an interesting little touch.
Yeah.
Along with the hotel that she checks in being Black Freighter and in Suites.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I didn't
That's
catch
a very
the
nice little touch. I missed that one.
I didn't catch the other detectives being there. That's interesting.
Yeah. So, yeah, 7th Cavalry member states that Joseph Keene Jr., you are a race traitor and declared open war on the 7th Cavalry. Surrender yourself or everyone dies. So they specifically want him.
Yeah. And then we even see, as they're going into the funeral, the protesters outside of the funeral
Yeah.
who want their guns.
That is.
Which is nuts too, because like that was I'd forgotten about that, because we haven't really come back to that since the first episode when they mentioned it on the radio. It's like the gun laws, and then we see it again with like them disarming the federal agents, but then it's also like, did they disarm the police? Because like we saw the 21 gun salute, but those are typically blanks when
Yeah.
they do those. So like we're
Typically, yeah.
so which makes me wonder, like, because it's a 7th Cavalry member going in there on their own, like, pretty much the only way to confidently do that is to know that everyone in there is unarmed.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that you've got all of these cops on hand who probably also were unarmed, because Laurie is the only one that acted.
Yeah.
And that just seems reckless.
Yeah, very
Like-
much so.
Like, especially, like, if you suspect that the chief was murdered by someone involved in this organization, why wouldn't you assume that they would probably try something at the funeral? Because, like, what better place to make a
Exactly.
statement?
I was going to say, if
It's like, we started with one dead cop. What a perfect place to just get all of the dead cops. Like, it's literally setting up a shooting gallery for them.
yeah, if
and then-
Laurie were in charge here, she would have, just like in the beginning of this episode, maybe have set up some kind of a stinged,
Yeah.
trap
And-
for them.
Well, and then also on top of that, like, the fact that the protesters were there is like, why wouldn't that have been a private ceremony?
Yeah.
Like, and earlier they even mentioned that, like, the funeral is happening quicker than usual because like they're not going to take the time to do like any kind of like chemical forensics or anything. It's like he was strangled to death. That's what we're calling
End of
it.
story.
And Laurie even mentions later, like, now there's no way they can exhume the body because, well, there's not much of a body left.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it just seems reckless on the parts of all of the law enforcement to disarm their entire force, to have a public funeral, like, given the circumstances of Crawford's death, and to just not have been anticipating that at all.
Yeah,
It's insane.
There's no thought going into the security there.
Yeah, no, it's like except for the guy at the gate checking for guns. That's it. And it also begs the question: is like, is there a mole inside the police force? Is that why Looking Glass was afraid to be on the receiving end of his racist Voight-Kampf machine?
Yeah.
So there's definitely some questions. And again, like, I mean, you said like Lindelof's like, oh, you're gonna get answers. Like, I feel good that we'll find things out as we keep going. But yeah, a lot of interesting choices in how that entire thing was handled.
Yeah, well, and how fast can you build a tunnel underground to a specific point? Like the rate
they
at which
mentioned that later, that they would have to have some kind of a drill, some kind of a specialized drill to do it that quickly.
But even so, that's super precise.
Yeah.
Like, you don't just come up with that in a couple days. I don't know.
Yeah, like it.
Something fishy's going on.
Yeah, and especially considering, as far as the viewers and Angela knows, like 7th Cavalry should not have been involved in this.
Yeah,
And Laurie says as much. She says 7th Cavalry always takes credit when they kill a cop.
so it also, I mean, maybe the 7th Cavalry wasn't even really 7th Cavalry.
Yeah.
I mean, how hard would it be to slap on an ink blot mask and say you're something you ain't?
Yeah.
Seems like good cover, especially if you're going to blow yourself up.
Yeah, and you're
Like-
trying to misdirect.
If they had taken that guy's mask off, would he have been a Mr. Phillips?
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, but man, that's the other thing too. Is like they don't even know what their suspect is, and now they're not going to.
He's gone.
Interesting. After that scene, we as Laurie is kind of recovering from the blast, we cut from Laurie's face to a bust with a purple mask on it. And we see a montage of Adrian working on schematics and miniatures of what looks like a catapult and creating a suit. We see him suiting up the new Mr. Phillips and tethering him to a rope before sending him off into the great beyond, which ends up killing him.
Still no idea what's happening here.
No.
Yeah, just he's just killing his employees.
Yeah.
That's okay. They'll be useful later, apparently.
Yeah, for his dead body fueled doomsday device or something.
Yeah. Then he angrily stomps on the body and ventures off to hunt a buffalo with a bow and arrow. And he's shot and warned off by a man with a gun. He then arrives back at the castle to meditate. Mrs. Crookshanks delivers a letter from the game warden, as we find out this man is. And then she transcribes a letter back to the game warden from Adrian, in which he finally reveals himself as Adrian Veidt.
Yep.
He then prepares to go hunting again that night, and we see him suit up as Ozymandias.
So the games warden, is that anything we know about from Watchmen?
That's brand new as far as I can remember.
Yeah, that's brand new, with the exception of this flag, probably like a no trespassing flag, is very reminiscent of like pirate black freighter imagery that is tied to Adrian in a number of different ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Gotcha.
but yeah, we don't know who this game warden is, what his deal is, and what his relationship is. But based on the letters that they send to each other, there's I don't know what
they're
kind
adversarial.
yeah,
We get that much.
Cordially so.
they're adversarial, and yet the game warden refers to him as his humble servant.
Yeah.
Yeah, he signs off, your humble servant, the game warden.
Yeah, which is, Yeah, I got more questions.
Yeah.
More questions. The game warden is our smoke monster. Well, then, correct me if I'm wrong. In the game warden's letter, doesn't he refer to the terms of Adrian's imprisonment? Captivity. That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I transcribed both of these just because I feel like there's so much to dive into. So the game warden's letter is, I beg your pardon, sir, but when you first arrived here, we agreed upon the terms of your captivity. Your recent behavior suggests an intention to violate those terms. As such, if this behavior continues, you'll face grave consequences, underlined. Know this, the next shot I fire, sir, will not be at your feet. Please consider this your first and only warning. Thank you again for the delicious tomatoes. Your humble servant, the game warden.
Interesting.
Which, I don't know if the game warden himself is another Mr. Phillips in a mask.
Yeah. Well, like just
If
programmed
he's-
for something.
Do you think
different.
the guy on the horse that shoots at him is the game warden,
Yeah, I would assume so.
Yeah, it makes sense.
or is he just a foot soldier for the game warden?
That's a potential as well. We don't really know.
Well, and then too, also is like, is the offense hunting the buffalo, or is it something he's done before?
That's
Because sending Mr. Phillips up in the suit seems like maybe an attempt to figure out an escape plan.
Mm-hmm.
The catapult, cartoonish as it may be, potential escape plan. Wile E. Coyote himself over a wall or something.
But the Mr.
Damon-
Phillips that comes back is like frozen.
yeah.
Okay.
He's been to space maybe. But
Right.
Damon Lindelof actually referred to all of the Adrian Veidt scenes as like you're cutting to like these Wile E. Coyote cartoons.
That's perfect. It's accurate so far. He set one on fire, and froze one to death in the cold vacuum of space. And these are just the ones that we've seen.
Yeah, we don't know what's going on.
We see him smack a third anniversary cake
Yes.
out of
3 candles.
Crookshanks in Phillips' hands
He's got no time for it anymore.
after his encounter with the game warden. Part of me wonders too, like, is this captivity some kind of a test to himself?
Yeah, I'm
Is it
kind of wondering.
self-imposed? Like,
Mhm.
maybe it's like, hey, put me in here, and I have to figure out how to get out or something,
Yeah.
just to kind of prove to himself that he still has everything. He's the world's greatest athlete, that he's the world's smartest man, all these things, because he definitely. One of the things about Veidt is he's a very vain character.
Yeah. Well, he's vain, and yet at the same time, it's only for himself.
Yeah.
Because what he accomplishes, he can't ever tell anybody about it.
Yeah.
He does it for his own personal like sense of accomplishment,
Yep.
and it begins and ends there, and potentially like God is like
Yeah. Well, and again, too, I know we talked about this in the first episode about Dr. Manhattan's last words to Veidt, that nothing ever ends. Like, is this what's been eating him up all these years?
yeah.
Is kind of that, like, only a handful of people know what he did. Well, I suppose, I guess everybody knows now if Rorschach's journal was released.
Or everybody has the potential to know.
Yeah.
In one of those Peteypedia files, they talk about kind of the public's perception of the Rorschach journal.
Right,
and
yeah,
how
because it's before that, so it's only suspected
yeah,
that Veidt is behind it somehow, but
yeah.
it's never
People just
confirmed.
think, yeah, people just write Rorschach off as just kind of a nut anyway.
Yeah. So then theoretically, the only people who know what he did, one of them is definitely dead, obliterated by Dr. Manhattan. The other one is Dr. Manhattan, who's on Mars, and then the other two are Laurie and Dan.
Yeah. I love that painting in her apartment of the
That
four
Andy
of them.
Warhol looking
Yeah.
thing with the four of them. Yeah.
And I was like, why is there only the 4 of them? And then I'm like, oh yeah, the 4 that are left alive.
Mm-hmm.
But But yeah, the Dr. Manhattan aspect is something else I'm thinking of. I'm wondering if he's getting desperate to talk to Dr. Manhattan himself. Is he trying to reach out to him? Is he trying to somehow get to Mars? Like,
that makes sense.
I don't know.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, especially because he's fixated on Manhattan's origin, so he wrote that play just to kind of to rewatch it for himself for whatever reason, or maybe in an attempt to get Manhattan's attention even.
Yeah.
So,
or is he? I don't know if. I guess they can't. He can't. Well, he already did. I was gonna say create an intrinsic field generator to try to make Dr. Manhattan happen again.
Yeah.
With one of these Mr. Phillips, but I don't think that's going on.
Oh no! Although I do love that. Just going back to an earlier scene, or maybe it's later. No, it's after the funeral. So we'll get to it after the funeral.
Yeah.
Just you mentioned the intrinsic field generator. And
Yes.
I thought of it.
Mm-hmm. That's
So yeah, it's really curious to see what exactly is going on with Veidt, what his motivations are, and especially seeing him suit up as Ozymandias again. Like that was really cool.
Such an accurate portrayal of the costume as well.
Yeah,
Because
the costume's great.
in the Zack Snyder movie, you talk about how well it translates from the comic into the film. And yet, there were like liberties taken to make it look a little more modern.
Yeah.
But like this costume, I saw it and I was like, whoa, this is the one.
Yeah,
they
this
just
looks
took
like
the comic.
the costume.
Yeah. I think another thing is the buffalo that he was hunting was probably so that he could get thicker skin.
Yeah,
for
he
the
makes
next,
that comment.
Yeah.
Oh,
When
yeah.
the Mr. Phillips thing doesn't
That
work,
makes
he
sense.
says that then
Need
the
a
skin is
thicker
too
skin.
thin.
Yep.
Oh no! Oh, is that why he uses all the corpses of the
Oh,
Phillips's?
is all
Is
the
it
hides
human
made
skin?
from that?
Maybe.
Oh gosh,
Could be.
no!
Oh, that's I didn't think of that.
I didn't until just now.
That's possible.
He could have totally done that. I will
Ooh.
give you bodies beyond your wildest imagination.
Oh boy, that's a lot of work. Skinning ain't easy.
He killed that buffalo with one shot too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
shot to
right
the
below
eye.
the eye.
Yeah. Good golly.
But that was impressive, man. I've gone after those things in Red Dead 2, and they're a pain in the butt to bring down.
That was a turn I wasn't expecting. I thought you were.
Bow and arrow, man.
Oof.
I don't know how many shotgun blasts I unloaded those dang things. They're still going.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, bring this hide back in great condition. How? Nothing in this game dies with a single arrow.
Looks like Swiss cheese.
Yeah, that he responds to the game warden, and then we cut to Senator Joe Keane addressing the news crews. He praises the swift and fearless actions of law enforcement. Laurie and Petey watch him before Laurie takes 2 coffees from Petey and enters the crime scene. She finds Angela investigating the tunnel that the 7th Cavalry member arrived in, and Laurie mentions they can't exhume the body now, and it's strange how quickly the funeral was scheduled considering it's an active murder investigation. Laurie also mentions a lot of details that Angela has to deflect and act as if she's oblivious to. Laurie knows that she is lying and calls her out on it and threatens her. Angela just shuts her down and leaves.
Yep.
We got to see the owl goggles again.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
We finally get to see Laurie and Angela really interact for the first time. Or it's probably not the first time, really.
Yeah.
But this is
It
like
was
the
just like
one-on-one.
a-
There's kind of the pretenses are dropped. They kind of know who each other are.
It's more of a.
Yet they're
more of a
still like
tete-a-tete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In both instances, they talk to each other. There's a ton of subtext going on
Yeah.
Yeah.
that Laurie knows more of what's going on, and Angela's just refusing to budge on any of it.
And which, again, I mean, if Angela wanted to deflect the idea that she's not a cop, investigating the tunnel is a pretty dumb way to make it obvious that you're still a cop.
Yeah.
Like the fact,
And not in costume either.
Yeah. I mean, what did you think was going to happen? Like, you're going to roll in there like Batman and nobody was going to walk in on you investigating the tunnel?
Laurie mentions wheelchair tire markings at the base of the tree.
Mm-hmm.
and the secret compartment in Crawford's closet, in which there was just a naked bust.
Yep.
So somebody had taken that, and she knows Angela is not the feigning type, and that she probably took something from said compartment.
Yep.
She said, men who end up hanging from trees with secret compartments in their closets tend to think of themselves as good guys. And those who protect them think they're good guys too. But here's the thing about me, Sister Night. I eat good guys for breakfast.
Yep.
So is that a reference to Dan then for her?
Could be. Could very well be.
That's how I took it, just not really coming from that background. I went, oh, she's kind of mostly speaking of her own experience.
Yeah. Or her current job right now, which is literally like taking down quote unquote good guys.
Yeah, that's kind of how I took it. I'm still hesitant to make any assumptions about what happened to Dan beyond what we've hammered out, which seems like the most logical. But I mean, it obviously seems like to some extent she cares about Dan. If Keen was able to kind of use that idea of getting her owl out of a cage as like essentially a bargaining chip.
Yeah. She's definitely got a soft spot in her heart for him.
Even though he's soft.
Jeez. Angela just outright refusing to be cooperative.
Oh, yeah.
Through and through.
Wasting Petey's coffee.
Yeah. Just dumped it out, which is disrespectful. Petey's going to need that coffee.
Yeah.
I love that we got that scene with Laurie and Petey, and clearly, he got some respect. And then now she's just taking his coffee. She she doesn't care.
Yeah, that's the part where he asked for the autograph.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, can I get an autograph? And also really quick, there's during the press conference,
yes, that's
or
when they
whatever,
asked.
quote unquote, one of the reporters mentions rumors of Russia building an intrinsic field generator.
Yeah.
And of course, Keen deflects it, but he's like, this is home. Like, I'm concerned about enemies foreign and abroad right now, or domestic. And right now, focused on here. Like, this is home. This is where the threat is.
Yeah.
It's like just kind of blowing off the whole whatever's going on with the Russians.
Yeah, he blows it off. And yet, in that same breath, he says, I promise to defend us from all enemies, foreign and domestic, which there's still like some unresolved tension with Russia from the 80s that is still unresolved if they're still considered in any way to be enemies.
Yeah. Which then that brings up the question of whose side is Red Scare really on? Because he's clearly a Russian emigre who is working for local law enforcement deep in the heart of America.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a straight up communist.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of literally his name.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, but I mean, for Oklahoma, for a Southern police force, people's like, yeah, no, we're cool with that. It's really interesting. I mean, and we've also seen like him employing essentially Gestapo tactics in the apprehension of suspects.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm real curious to see what more, if anything, gets explored with his character.
Oh, yeah.
And like,
I'm sure there
especially
will be
like
some stuff.
what kind of connection, if any, there is to whatever tensions might be happening between the U.S. and Russia in this world.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of just questions brought up in that one single line. I also love that shot of Keen too, with he's got the red tie on, and he's got blood from the scene earlier. It's still like all over his collar.
Yeah, from when it was shot. From the 7th Cavalry guy got shot in the blood splatter.
Yeah.
Yeah, the blood smear looks pretty close to the smiley face.
Yeah.
Blood splat.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really cool.
Yeah. I also wondered if it's some kind of a visual foreshadowing that Keen could be dying here soon.
Oh, it's possible.
Oh.
I feel like just, as I'm going through these episodes and I'm just pausing, like every frame could be, you can stop it and you can study it just like you can all of the panels in the comic.
Yep.
It's crazy for a show to be like that. It to be so intentional about everything that's in the frame and all of the things that all the questions that are brought up within those frames.
Literally, I know it's like the 18th time I've mentioned it, but like Breaking Bad is one of the only other shows I can think of that has had that attention to detail.
Yeah.
That's like been so meticulous, like in the way every shot is crafted. Like nothing is incidental in that show.
No.
And nothing is incidental in this show either. It's like everything that we see, everything that we hear, there's a purpose. Some of those purposes might be a little bit lighter. Like again, like the Devo song, I think the connection was solely like just
simple callback.
A callback, but it was intentional. Like she could have literally listened to anything. Like, no, this character explicitly mentions an admiration for the band Devo, so let's remind everyone that we remember that detail.
Yeah,
like show that here. So yeah, it's fascinating. Like I'm really excited once this is done to do like a rewatch.
Oh yeah.
Because like because I'm only watching each episode once while we're doing this, because like I want to come at it from like the perspective of it being fresh, but not having analyzed it too much. Because I think Travis, you're bringing that to the table.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely.
I think you've got the more intensive research coming in, and then Ryan and I coming in fresh, but like again, also with obviously me being more versed in the comic books and him not being there yet. Like I think we've got three very different approaches to how we prepare for this and how we study it. But I really want to go back when this is done and see those little things. Like I feel like every episode there's something you've mentioned that I have not caught, and for a show to be that rewarding for rewatches, like there are so few things that ever pay off that way. Like Coen Brothers are again one of the things I think of, like where a lot of their movies you can go back. Like I don't know, I've seen The Big Lebowski 30 plus times. And every couple of times I will see, like, I'll find something new. Like, maybe super small, but, like, I'll find something new that was put there intentionally to service the story or the characters somehow. And, like, it just kind of, like, blows my mind. It's like, this is amazing. Like, this level of detail, this level of care that this thing is crafted with.
Yeah.
And, God, like, everything. Well, not everything. That'd be exhausting. But more things should strive for that level of attention and craftsmanship.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Looking at you, Mandalorian.
Oh my! I was about to say no coffee cups being left on the table in this series.
The tragedy of that Starbucks cup in Game of Thrones is it was probably the least worst thing about that season.
Oh.
I would have taken the Starbucks gaff if they would have stuck the landing. Or, decided to not care about pretty much the entire second half of the season. It's like, hey, what if these first episodes we try a little bit and then we just give up after the long night or whatever it was.
So this whole, like, the whole 7th Cavalry stuff popped up with the officer at the beginning of the first episode, Charlie Sutton getting shot.
Yes.
But we've not heard anything about him since the end of that episode, right? I mean,
he was in recovery.
Right. Crawford was going to go visit him, but have we heard anything? Did we hear anything last episode?
No, but I think that's probably more just because it's not super relevant to the story.
Yeah. I feel like
it's not a huge thing, but like, I'm curious, when does this come back around?
I think it was probably more meant to just be an inciting incident than anything.
Yeah.
And then to be the excuse that got Crawford out of his home.
Yeah, Ryan, we're definitely more concerned with the fate of the white guy right now.
Oh, no. No, but I just assumed, because like it sounded like he was conscious, he was making a recovery. But then on that note, why there hasn't been any conversation with him. So that actually is a really good point, which makes me wonder, was the phone call not real? I mean, like, did somebody just call and say, like, hey, this cop that we know you got shot, like, recovered? Which again leads to the theory that it would have had to have been somebody on the force. because there's probably no way, there's no explicit way that Louis Gossett Jr.'s character, Will, right?
Yeah,
Will
Reeves.
Yeah.
There's no way that Will Reeves probably would have known that the officer had recovered yet, let alone the officer's identity, but probably knew enough, to intercept Crawford on his way to the hospital, but probably would have had to have been an officer that made the call, or at least knew that Sutton was hospitalized.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I mean, and maybe that's how they. To me, if it was just the inciting incident, then he dies. We don't need him anymore. Let it just be a.
Yeah, that's it. It's like I don't think
fatality.
he's dead because when they were there, it seemed like he was going to make a recovery. He just wasn't
Yeah.
conscious yet.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just writing wise, just so that Crawford has a reason to leave the house.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like if he's not relevant, then why does he survive? And maybe that's not maybe I'm.
Well, I mean,
grasping at
it could
straws.
be. I mean, he never woke up. Maybe that was a lie.
Mm-hmm.
So-
Yeah, we don't really have any confirmation.
Yeah,
one
we
way or
haven't
the
heard a
other.
follow up about. So maybe that's something that'll pop up because I mean, a lot of the focus obviously has been on the murder of Crawford since that first episode.
We bookend the episode with Laurie wrapping up her narrative joke voiceover as we see her and Petey arrive back at the hotel. Laurie takes out the metal briefcase that we see her open at the beginning of the episode and reveals a giant Dr. Manhattan sex toy, which she ends up going next door and sleeping with Petey instead. And we
Do we know that it's instead?
I guess we don't.
Maybe she warmed up first. We do know that for whatever reason, the Dr. Manhattan sex toy comes with what looks like testicles
Yeah.
attached to it.
Attachable.
Well, yeah, you have to
Which-
attach them.
I'm going to say this. I'm not an authority on sex toys, but testicles seems purely cosmetic as far as the application of said sex toy. I don't know why they're there.
I don't know either.
Also, that thing was huge.
Yeah.
That thing looked like it could hurt somebody. That thing looked like it should be plugged in to be operated.
Oh, that's a poor choice of words.
I mean, there are some that you have to plug in to operate. Oh, I see what you're saying. Sorry, plugged into a power source
It's still not out.
before they're inserted into a power source.
Well, so we're also still getting the voiceover.
Yeah, she ends up going next door with Petey, and then we end with Laurie in the booth finishing her joke, in which a little girl kills God with a brick, which that's a
bricklayer
payoff from
joke,
earlier.
yep.
And she questions why she's always leaving these messages. She questions whether he's really listening, and she leaves the booth, and Angela's car falls from the sky at her feet.
Yeah.
And she laughs as she looks up at the sky and sees Mars.
Yep.
Just so much, so
Lot
much
going
stuff.
on. Well, also one thing to keep in mind: when she sleeps with Petey, she makes him put on a mask.
Yeah, she either makes him do that or he decides to do that himself.
It's true.
I feel like he's probably taking orders in that exchange.
Yeah,
I feel like Laurie's probably calling the shots in that bedroom.
yeah.
At least that's how it struck me, because again, it harkens back to the comic where her
the
and
only
Dan
way
aren't
her
able
and
to have
Dan
sex
can do it,
until they're in
yeah.
the costumes, and then depending on which version you go with, they either listen to Dizzy Gillespie or whoever, or that Leonard Cohen song,
Yeah.
Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah.
Hallelujah or
Yep.
You're My Thrill.
Yeah, You're My Thrill. That's what it was. Was it Dizzy Gillespie? No, it was somebody else. Count Basie, maybe. I can't remember who the actual artist was. Remember, it was a jazz singer.
Yeah. It's
But
not
the
Ella
movie-
Fitzgerald? I don't know.
Might have been Ella Fitzgerald. But the movie is definitely the raspy voice stylings of Leonard Cohen.
But that was Angela's car for sure.
I think so.
Yeah,
I
it
didn't-
was
I
a
didn't
station
for sure.
wagon.
I didn't double check, but
I took it to be the car that we saw Will disappear in, and like that weird alien abduction escape at the end of the
Yeah.
last episode.
yeah.
And it kind of plays into her joke as well about the brick that goes up. At
Yeah.
the beginning of the episode, we see it come back down. So it's kind of a representative of that as well to a degree.
Which raises all the more questions about who
Yeah,
Will is.
well,
Like,
I
is
mean,
Will
it obviously fell from the sky. I mean, to land in front of her at that exact moment, like in
In
that
that
exact
spot.
place, had like, it feels like it had to have been deliberate,
Yeah.
which makes you wonder, like, is Dr. Manhattan paying attention?
Yeah, we don't know who it is or what it is that's lifting
Will's
and dropping
working
these
with.
things
Yeah.
from the sky. He
Yeah.
claims he is Dr. Manhattan. Or-
Right.
Yeah. Which that I don't necessarily think is true.
Yeah.
But I do think it stands to reason that there could obviously be some kind of cahoots being had, some cahoots.
Mhm.
Right, because Will also says he has friends in high places.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yup.
But so much in that episode, in this scene and the episode in general to unpack and look at and wonder about the whole Dr. Manhattan Booth thing. She questions whether or not he's really listening, if he cares. I saw some people questioning, do these booths really work? Are we really, have we really contacted Dr. Manhattan, or do we have a way of contacting him
Yeah.
in the past 35 years? Or is this something that the government put together to give people comfort? Because Dr. Manhattan in this world is the closest thing to God. So you want to
Yeah.
give people this way to contact and communicate with God,
Yeah.
even if it's, not real. And the way that they frame those shots of her telling the joke in the booth, and the booth itself, very much reminded me of like a confessional.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of like religious imagery going on there. And the whole, so many ideas in Watchmen are kind of about how people, what they believe, and how those beliefs influence what you do.
Yeah.
And there are so many fabricated beliefs in Watchmen as well. So, it stands to reason that could be happening here as well.
That's kind of like the way, what is it, NORAD has the Santa Claus tracker.
Oh, yeah.
Like just something to kind of appease people.
That's a great parallel.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
It's true.
here's this booth. Call Mars, and Dr. Manhattan will hear a voicemail. Send him a letter. We'll take it at USPS, and you can tell him what you want for Christmas this year.
No, I took it to mean like the way they portray these booths is very like run down. Like it's almost like a carnival sideshow thing. It doesn't. I didn't take it to be legitimate whatsoever. It's just
it seems like a racket too, because
yeah.
they even mention, they refer to Laurie as a platinum member of that service that they do, which makes us think that this is not the first, second, or even third time she's done this. Like this is probably like a regular thing for her, like the way that somebody would go to confessional every week. Like just to kind of to unburden themselves, or feel like they're doing something to like try and improve their station in life in general.
So with her joke, she tells, she's got 4 different perspectives. It's kind of 4 of the 5 main characters in the Watchmen. Why does Rorschach get left out of that?
Well, like I said before, I think all of those 4 characters who are portrayed in that painting and who are told in the joke is probably just because those are the ones that are still around.
Okay.
Yeah, and like in terms too, also like those are the characters that have impacted her life the most.
Yeah.
Because like Manhattan and Night Owl, like she was romantically involved with both of them, and then Veidt, like his plan, like literally changed the course of her life. Like she went into hiding with Dan after all of that.
Yeah.
And presumably up until whatever changed that she's now working for the government. So I mean, those are, in addition to being 3 very distinct types of men, those are the 3 men that have, outside of her father, the comedian, who have had the biggest impact on her life.
Yeah.
Which is why I took it to be that it was about those 3 and nobody else. Like if the comedian was still alive, there might have been a 4th part to that joke.
Yeah.
But I mean, the comedian essentially is like she's telling a joke. So like, I mean, the comedian is present there. Like that's his, because in the comics, like he even tells the Pagliacci joke.
the comedian does. This is actually a callback to Rorschach. Rorschach's the one who.
Oh, yes,
who
you're
does
right.
the Pagliacci joke.
Yes.
Roll on snare drum, curtains, good joke, and that's how
Yes.
they end that episode or in that issue.
Yeah, so that Laurie is literally quoting Rorschach.
Yeah.
So Rorschach is represented to a point then. Oh, God. Yeah, the comedian never really tells any jokes. No, think about it.
He just finds
he
the
just
whole-
has that mental breakdown in front of Moloch.
Yep.
And-
Because he sees everything and he sees the world for what it is, and he sees the joke, which at the end of this episode we see her just like laughing and looking up at the sky as she kind of
Has
is
that same
embodying that as
realization.
well. And she's the one person in this whole world other than Dan and Adrian, but maybe more so her than anybody else because of her relationship and her intimacy with Manhattan. And she knows who he really is, and she knows Adrian, and she knows what he did. She's got more of a big picture in this world than anybody else.
Yeah.
And so she sees the whole of it for the joke that it really is,
Yeah.
more than anybody. Yeah. And just really good on them for making Laurie such a much more interesting, deep, conflicted, way more entertaining and interesting character than she ever was in the book. In the book, she's definitely, the least interesting character.
Oh, sure.
She's present.
Well, that's the thing. Is like in the book, I feel like her only real moment to shine is the entire issue where she's on Mars
Yeah.
with Dr. Manhattan. Outside of that, like she kind of gets pushed to the side a lot.
Yeah.
Which is like why she doesn't stick out in the movie as much either, because it's the same thing. But I mean, it doesn't hinge on anything because like ultimately Dr. Manhattan doesn't end up stopping anything. But we're at least led to believe up until right about the end of the Watchmen that if humanity is saved or whatever is prevented, it's because Laurie went to Mars with Dr. Manhattan and convinced him that human life was worth saving.
She's this connection between humanity and Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah.
Always has been.
But then ultimately that connection doesn't mean anything because they all decide that the best thing to do is keep quiet about what Adrian has done.
Mm-hmm.
So none of it mattered. Like literally the only thing that changes is that Manhattan kills Rorschach, preventing the world from finding out with certainty what really happened that day in New York.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, what I think is really cool about how they've written her character so far, though, is like we've gotten a couple episodes with Angela, with Looking Glass, with these other like really tough, badass characters that are really well written and interesting in their own right. And then up against Laurie, they didn't artificially make them weaker. They didn't like it's the characters still stand as badass as they've ever been, but she's just all that much deeper.
Yeah, she's on another level.
She's on so much of a different level. Like these guys are playing cops and robbers by comparison, and she just walks in and she's like, "All right, no, like we're just gonna clean up."
Yeah, that's the thing too. Is like, I mean, because like Angela and them, like they've lost something, but like not to the extent that Laurie has.
No. Yeah, and she, again, in the comic, everything that you know about her from her childhood, the first part of her life where she was just a pawn.
Yeah.
She was this basically like she had a pageant mom who raised her. She was at the whims of whatever her mom wanted her to do. And then she goes straight from that to being Dr. Manhattan's love interest. So she was either at the whims of whatever Manhattan wanted and whatever the government wanted from her so that they could get something out of Manhattan. Like she's never been her own person. So it's very interesting to see her with her own agency and interests.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and of course she's uninterested in everybody else's motivations at this point.
Yeah.
She's done. She's had it. She's heard it all. She's had the weight of the world on her shoulders in very literal senses, and So a cop getting killed by the 7th Cavalry just is not a big deal to her.
Yeah.
She can manage it. I thought for sure they were just going to kill her off at the end,
Oh, interesting.
just as kind of a keeping you off balance kind of a move. And it like in the title, it kind of implies.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
She was
she was killed by space junk. She
Yeah.
was nearly killed by space junk.
Yeah, I don't know what the episode is referring to by.
I don't know either. But so I was almost anticipating that for them to go like, all right, here's a peek at how big this universe can be, and we're going to close that and move back on to, Angela and the gang.
The Dr. Manhattan sex toy gives her cancer. It's got a depleted uranium core. That's how it's powered.
Oh my.
That's the space junk.
Yeah, I'm just. She's apparently going to be around for a while, and
Yeah.
holy cow, I can't wait.
Yeah, no, I'm very much looking forward to her interactions with the already established characters and
Yeah.
the potential for more legacy characters to be brought in.
This is the first episode that we didn't get any Don Johnson
Yeah.
outside of the photo in the press in the briefing room.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they could have. He might have been an extra in the coffin the whole time. They might have paid him for that day.
Oh, that's true.
They just didn't use
But,
that.
but yeah, like we didn't get like any flashback into the character. We didn't get
Yeah.
any additional insight into anything.
Yeah. Yeah, this is definitely very much like the comics, where they you've got these plot issues where you see things moving forward, and then sometimes there are character issues in which you get backstory and you get to dive deep into a character, and sometimes that can halt the plot to a degree. And this is definitely one of those issues, and I think Lindelof has said as much, that we're going to get some more of those coming down the line, where we're getting like more backstories. I'm looking forward to
Fine
seeing
with me.
whoever we see. Yeah, I would love to see an episode like this where we get a deep dive into Looking Glass, which I'm
that'd
sure
be
we
great.
will. Definitely very much looking forward to seeing next week's episode and how this series just continues to just go so deep and so rich. And I feel like no matter how much you talk about it, there's just a ton of stuff that it's like, oh, we missed this. We could have talked about this.
Yeah,
every
absolutely.
week.
If you're listening at home and you catch things that we miss, let us know.
Yeah.
Leave a comment somewhere.
Oh, we're going to have like 20 pages of things we missed.
Yeah. We got an email address, right?
Yeah. Our email address to reach the show at is whowatchespodcast@gmail.com. We are also Who Watches Pod on Twitter, and we are on Facebook as Who Watches Pod. Please remember to leave us reviews on iTunes. Those are greatly appreciated. Ryan, where can people find you at?
You can find me on Twitter at Harbjagen, HARBJAGEN.
And Dustin?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Dustin Meadows. And you can also check out what I've got going on comedy-wise by just going to DustinMeadowsComedy.com. And then the second Friday of every month, this Friday actually, be my monthly show, Comedy Town, at Cafe Kerouac in Columbus. So come check that out.
Very nice. And again, that is this week's episode. We look forward to seeing episode 4 of Watchmen this Sunday and joining all of you again next week. Thank you and good night.
Quis custodiet ipsos custodes?